It's time for Smart Money Moves. Did you grow up talking about money, spending, savings, or homeownership? Do you talk about money with your children or your parents? Whatever the situation, we have some tips to get those money and financial conversations started. That's coming up right now on Smart Money Moves. Hi, I'm Marcia Griffin, and I am happy to welcome you to Smart Money Moves, Building Wealth for Everyday People. Studies show few families talk about money issues and therefore miss out on creating healthy money habits for children and family members. What types of conversations should you have with your children? How should we broach sensitive money topics like housing or savings with our parents or siblings or others? Here to shed some light on healthy money conversations are AJ Barkley, Neighborhood and Community Lending Executive at Bank of America, and Tamara Gifford, Director of Community and External Relations at Ocwen Financial. Welcome to both of you. So, AJ, let me just start with you. What types of money conversations did you really have growing up in your family?
Well, thank you for having me, and not enough. I will start there. When I was, I reflect, we've had this conversation before. I reflect on our dinner discussions. I reflect on us planning activities for the weekend. And they really surrounded shopping. It was all about shopping. It was, what do I want? What are my desires? Versus, let's say, for a targeted item or an event or an activity as a child. And so we didn't spend a lot of time talking about that. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about balancing checkbooks, and not that people use checkbooks these days, but really like balancing your money and prioritizing how you spend. So just not enough, which has affected how I've actually talked to my children going forward.
And that's really an excellent point. Tamara, did your family talk about money when you were growing up? I know there are some unique features about growing up in a Korean community. Tell us about some of the money conversations that you had with your parents.
Yeah, well, great. Thank you so much, Marcia, for inviting me here today. And growing up, most of the conversations really centered around how money was going to affect my future career choice. My father was an entrepreneur, always owned his own business. And so he was very big into, setting your own course and making sure that, my lifestyle was making sure that I knew that my lifestyle was going to be impacted by the career choice that I made. And so if I wanted to live a certain lifestyle, I needed to make sure that I was going to make a certain amount of money. And so that's really where our conversation centered around, was how it impacts your future.
Absolutely. So getting back to you, AJ, understanding what you said about shopping and looking pretty and all of that, I mean, that's the case in many families. So how do you sort of take from that to the conversations that you're having now with your children? What kind of conversations are you having with your children today?
It's a great question. So even though we talked about shopping and spending, we did talk about working. And so, I began working at 16. My brother began working at 16. So we did have a responsibility to be in control of the funds that were available to us. So it wasn't just totally like, go crazy, but it really was around focus on employment, focus on having control of your career, focus on being prepared to have your own money. And so for my children, very early on, I made sure, being a banker for a very long time, made sure that we really talked about what is your goal, talking about parameters of spend. What is it that is most important to you? And then really have them think about quality of the spend you make and how do you save and prepare for for emergencies, which, we really didn't think a lot about, but I start to talk to my kids
That's
about
right.
that. And then lastly, if there's something specifically that they want that is not a necessity, have them start planning for that and then giving them allowances and targeted amounts of money to spend versus thinking like my daughters, very early thought it was just about this little plastic card that, you went
Yeah.
to a machine and you got money, right? You have to say, well, no, there's got to be money in there to get that. And so really just connecting those dots.
Tamara, let me just get back to you. When
Mhm.
talking to family members now, and I mean your parents, your
Yeah.
siblings, other family members, what do you talk about with them now?
Yeah. So I have four much younger brothers who are all in their early 20s. And so
Mhm,
I think it's really important to have conversations with them about not sacrificing their future for what they want right now. So a good
mhm.
example of that is, especially with the younger generation or a lot of folks, you think nothing of stopping at Starbucks every day, buying a $5, $6, $7 coffee. Whereas, you're really sacrificing your potential future, financial future by when you could be taking that money and putting it aside into a retirement account or putting it aside into a savings account. So I really, make sure that they keep in mind of don't sacrifice your long-term goals for something that you want right now and really focus on saving for that house or for that car or whatever, for retirement someday. And instilling in the fact that they, even though they're in their 20s, need to start thinking about retirement now, because no matter what, if they set aside a little bit now, it's going to be easier in the long term for them.
Well, it is so difficult when you're in your 20s and maybe even 30s start thinking about retirement, but it is smart. And if you
Hmm.
can begin to plan at that time, my goodness,
Yeah.
when you get much older and much wiser, you certainly
Uh-huh.
will have money saved. AJ, let me get back to you. Why do you think so many families of color in particular just don't even talk about money?
Well, I think some of it is you only know what you are exposed to yourself, and sometimes the conversations are not very easy. And so I think
Hmm.
that's part of the root of that. But I'd like to get back to the point around what you can do to,
Okay.
because I think that's the problem. And what I would say to the listeners, I think what you have to do is when you are employed, to your point about retirement, like let's start talking about it early on with our children, our nieces, our nephews. They don't think about, am I leveraging the full 401k at the company I'm at? They don't think
Yeah.
about the saving, and they really have not necessarily at a young age, although we start to see more of that, really understand how to build wealth. And that coffee does add up to the point we was
Hmm.
just made, and how you spend on those things, because most people want wealth and they want to build wealth. They're just not sure how to start.
So, does talking about money that you don't have, does that help or hurt the relationship that kids have with money?
I don't think it hurts it. I think the context around the conversation matters. So let me give you an example. Sometimes people think I'm not in a position to be philanthropic because I don't
Hmm.
have surplus income. But what you're trying to create is an environment for your children, regardless of your income, regardless of how much money comes in your home. How do you spend and how do you save and how do you still give back? Because then your
Hmm.
kids start to see
Excellent.
that in the environment, and it could be just as simple as $1 to a contribution to an organization. I think you can't make the money conversation one that people fear having.
Yeah.
And the last thing, this is just a personal comment, I don't think your kids should have that stress. I think
Yeah.
you have to figure out how to protect them from the stress, but help them be responsible. That would be the balance that I would reflect.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's the whole purpose of Smart Money Moves. And hopefully, a lot of the information that we're talking about here will go to the children and be able to give some insight, because dealing with money issues can be very, very, very stressful. Tamara, let me ask you this. What have
Sure.
you found to be the easiest way to save money?
I think paying yourself first, and I think making sure that that any family members that are starting to save and stuff realize that as well. Because if you pay yourself first, I mean, first of all, nobody else is going to have as much vested in your financial success as you, and so it's important that you pay yourself first. And starting, even if it's just 1% into a 401k, even if it's just whatever the company is matching, do whatever you can and then go from there, because you can't spend it if you don't see it. So if you automatically save, it makes it easier to chip away at bigger goals, and it makes it that you're doing it no matter what. It becomes very easy to, once you've been paid, to think, oh, okay, well, whatever's left, I'll put X number of dollars aside in a savings account. Well, as we know, things always come up. And so if you're paying yourself first, then you're taking care of those long-term financial goals before everything else. And so again, it's really putting your future at first instead of spending it on potentially frivolous things, because it's impulsive and you want to stop for lunch, or you want to, run into somewhere for something. It's much easier when you're paying yourself first.
Can I just
Absolutely.
add there? Can I just add real
Please.
quick? I think the way, so someone says, well, how do you know how much you should pay yourself first? So how do you have your, Tamara was talking about being ready. The thing that I was raised to think through is, how do I have, 2 months or 3 payroll checks worth of my money in the bank?
Yeah.
So if you have an unplanned emergency, the car breaks down, something happens, that you're not stranded. Because the worst thing to do is not have funds in the one place you have to get to, which is your job. You can't get to because of transportation. So if someone's thinking, well, what should that be when I'm like paying myself first and I'm trying to save? Think about 3 paychecks. Whatever your 3 paychecks are, may be something for you to have as a target.
Yeah, that's a great
Absolutely.
point.
Absolutely. So let me just ask both of you, is it a smart idea when we're talking about saving to have multiple savings account, or is it just easier to have an automatic debit into one account, or should you have a reserve account for emergencies and another for standard savings? What do you all think? Tamara, I'll start with you.
Okay, great. I think it depends on your personality. I think some people are able to have just one account and they know that that one account is for specific things. For other folks, it might be easier to have separate goals, separate accounts for separate goals. That way you can kind of see your progress. And I think starting out that might be a good solution for folks, because if you've got an account set aside for the 3 months, of expenses, when you've hit that goal versus, and then if you have an account set aside for, a new car or a new house, keeping it separate lets you see your progress and lets you see your successes. And so as you achieve your goals, then you're gaining more confidence and you're really having the ability to say, okay, look, I can achieve this goal. What's next?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think it's, I agree with Tamara totally.
Yeah.
I think you can have multiple accounts, but this is what I would tell people. I think wherever people bank today, wherever you do your banking, wherever you get your guidance, I would suggest you sit down and have a transparent conversation with them around what your personal goals are and your professional goals, and let them guide you. There's ways to set targets for yourself and kind of back into that number. And you know what it also does when you decide your savings account, you can then decide what's my big budget item and what's my living expense item that I'm going to save for. What's the thing 3 months from now, 9 months? But I absolutely think it is individual, as Tamara said. And the problem sometimes with one account is you're not keeping track of what your goals are and saving accordingly. So however you want to do it. Look, I was told, I have a friend of mine that actually just has 7 to 10 envelopes. And they pay themselves first in an envelope, and then they put everything in the bank, right? And so it just depends if it's a short-term save or a long-term save. But a lot of times, Marcia, people are just afraid and ashamed, and they don't want to go talk to someone. So I think having a trusted person, wherever they may be, in your life, again, where you may do business. Just talk to them and get some guidance so you know that you can help. One, it helps to relieve some of the stress you might be feeling trying to figure it all out. So that would be the only other recommendation besides deciding how many accounts you need.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think just having some money in the bank, whatever you can afford to put there, just gives you a level of confidence that you have something to fall back on. So even if we haven't started yet, look, start putting a little bit of money away every 2 weeks, even if it's $5, $10, $100, whatever you can afford. I think that we certainly want to do that. Let me just ask both of you a question, and I'll get back to you, and I'll start with you on this, AJ. What financial conversations do you have with your older relatives? I mean, what are you talking to them about? And does this come easy, or is it a stretch? Is it stressful to talk to older relatives about finances?
But it's interesting because I've had these conversations with my parents recently and aunts and uncles because they are, more senior, and their way of thinking about money and how they talked about money is very different. I think the conversations I have most now with my family is, are they prepared for retirement? Do they have their personal situation situated around where their money is?
Yeah.
Where is your money sitting? Is it liquid? Talking to them about tax implications of anything that they may have. Do they have insurance? And so there's all types of conversations that these may be more uncomfortable, to your point earlier around children. I think these are the uncomfortable ones when you're talking to your parents about things and they tell you, well, in the suitcase, in the closet, behind, like, you have got to have those conversations with your family because it happens, right? And so it is uncomfortable, but it is absolutely important, because the worst thing that could happen is there's funds and things available that your family wants to be used appropriately that they don't even know is there. And so, it is a good opportunity to speak to advisors and others that can really help your family. The last thing I would say is when people are planning for retirement, is not too late. And so even if you have family members that are, 15, 20 years into working, I think they still should go, and you should still encourage them to seek to take advantage of any benefits that exist today in their company to help their money work harder for them. But it is difficult. I guarantee you it is. My mom hates when I talk to her about it, but I'm going to talk to her about it as much as possible. And my dad.
Very good. Absolutely. Well, this is what's needed. And Tamara, how about you? Do you talk to your parents or your older relatives about money, and how do they feel about this?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what AJ just said. These types of conversations do tend to be more difficult than I find with younger family members. And I wonder if it's not a generational thing. My mother's very uncomfortable with talking about money. It just wasn't something that she did in her family. So getting information from her sometimes is very difficult. She also doesn't have a great understanding of it. And so I think sometimes that holds her back too. So it's really just, having making sure that we have those conversations in a way that she can understand, in a way that she feels is comfortable. And making sure that she's making the most of the funds that she does have. So, but yes, those are very difficult conversations.
I know it's difficult across the board, but one question though, in growing up with both of you, was credit ever brought up? Credit reports, credit scores, credit debt, was that ever talked about with you, Tamara?
Not really. I have to say, I mean, it wasn't until I got older and it wasn't until I wanted to buy a car. So prior to that, we probably never had any conversations about credit. When I got to the point where I wanted to buy a car, we started talking about credit and what was necessary. And honestly, I wish that I had known about it beforehand, not so much that I would have been able to do much more about it. At the time I was about 16, but just to have a better understanding of it. So I think those conversations are very important, and how it can impact your ability to get good interest rates in the future, to be able to, get jobs. These days, employers do credit checks. So maintaining a good credit score is extremely important, not only for purchasing power, but also just, for everyday life, and being able to get jobs and get car insurance and get different things. Credit is having a bigger impact, more so now than it ever has. So it's definitely important to have those conversations. But
Absolutely. How about you, AJ? Do you talk to your kids about credit? Do you all look at credit reports, or do you sort of wait until they? Or you're thinking that you should wait until they get a little bit older?
Actually, in my household, when I was growing up, we did talk about credit, because I watched my parents purchase homes and buy cars, and I heard the conversations. They didn't like directly have them with me, but I
Yeah.
think with my children, absolutely. I think what what we have to demystify about credit for people is, one of the things my parents did say: "Oh, you should never have a credit card. You should never have credit like
Okay.
that." And the way credit works today, I think Tamara was referencing it. Credit, when you have credit and you have borrowed money, your ability to demonstrate you can repay it opens up the opportunity for you to borrow more for whatever those major purchases may be. And so what I've said to my children is, be responsible. If you have credit, if you do not have a job, you might not want to have credit card, because you got to be able to repay it unless somebody else is going to
That's right.
be repaying it for you. So the conversations I have with my children is start, be responsible. Usually, when they're younger, if they're getting credit cards, the credit lines are relatively low. I had to educate my kids on how you pay your credit. There's a minimum due payment. You should probably pay more than your minimum due payment, so you can demonstrate that you can handle the debt. And so those are the things I counsel them on. You can get credit reports for free, because you want to make sure, for fraud purposes and a whole bunch of things, that you understand what's going on with your credit report. But I think having those conversations now, to Tamara's point, is even more important. We talk about credit being pulled for other reasons, because there's integrity sometimes aligned with how much in debt a person might be, and people look at those things. I mean, I can't speak for all industries, but I do think it's extremely important that you have the conversations with your kids, because what happens is, again, my daughter watched me take out my debit card and get cash out of an ATM. Kids without the thorough knowledge of that think that credit card, you just keep spending on it and you don't have to pay it back. So I think it is important to have that conversation. So if you're going to buy sneakers or something and you're using a credit card, then you would say to your son, okay, how are we going to pay back the $60, whatever the sneakers are, over 30 days? And I think that's how you do it. So for younger kids, it makes sense. And then for your older kids, if you just kind of keep seeing when you're out with them and they just keep pulling out a plastic, and you're like, okay, so how's that working for you? How are you paying your debt? How are you paying more than your minimum due? Do you feel comfortable?
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, both of you are doing such a great job in life, with your family, with your siblings, with your children. Look, we have just about run out of time. Let me just ask both of you this, and I'll start with you, Tamara. What smart money moves would you like our viewers to remember?
Like AJ said earlier, having somebody to help you, having somebody to be an advocate for you and stand by your side. I think if you're looking to save for a home, it's very important to speak with a housing counselor or a financial advisor, or somebody who can help you make sense of your financial information. And then also, again, just chipping away at it, even if you're just doing a small amount over time, that really builds up. And so don't lose sight of your goals, and just keep focused on that. And so, like, if you're working and you get a raise, if you take part of that raise and increase the amount of savings that you're doing, so that you can eventually hit that goal of buying a home.
Great advice, AJ. I want to get your thoughts about a smart money move that you want our audience to remember and adhere to. What would you suggest?
Prioritize your spend and what your savings goal is. And it is never, ever, ever too late. I talk to people all the time that are like, I want to buy a home. I'm, well beyond maybe what we consider to be first-time home buyers. How do I get there? And you save with a goal, and then you leverage trusted advisors, like Tamara said. Know that's your goal. It is never, ever too late.
And look, whether you decide to buy a home or buy a second home or want to go on a vacation or send your kids to college, whatever it is, the conversation that you have with yourself, with your parents, with your kids and your family, those conversations are so important. I appreciate the discussion today, and a special thank you to our audience for joining us. For more information about Smart Money Moves, go to WHUT.org. See you next time on Smart Money Moves, and remember, together we can and will make a difference.
This program was produced by WHUT and made possible by contributions from viewers like you. For more information on this program or any other program, please visit our website at WHUT.org. Thank you.